I drifted, weightless, in vacuum. Some people don't much like free fall. I rather enjoy it. An hour's nap in 0G leaves me almost as refreshed as a full night's sleep in the most comfortable groundside bed you can find. But I wasn't floating out there for my personal enjoyment. I was shedding heat. The EVA suit I wore was a masterpiece of hybrid technology. Human-designed insulation alongside bubbler superconductors and other parts that liberally mixed one with the other within the skin and helmet of the suit. It was all designed to allow one thing to happen. Wearing that suit, I was going to land on Faz'Reep, our best transliteration of the name of the bubbler home planet, and walk about among them. We still didn't have a word for what bubblers called themselves. Human speech organs just didn't possess the ability to form the correct phonemes. But they were good sports about it, and seemed happy to let us keep using that word, even when they knew where it came from. My best bubbler buddy, whose name came out something like Saduk, when I ignored about half the syllables in it, personally thought it was funny. During one of our video calls, he'd shown me where he had a picture of me blowing soap bubbles up on the wall, in his home. It was kind of touching. He'd introduced me to his wife during the same call, and we'd hit it off straight away. The best part was when she said that Saduk hadn't stopped talking about me for days after the time we'd scared off the Tanarak invasion force, then made a joke about me being the other woman. I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. I'd actually expected to catch a reprimand after the Tanarak thing. Lowly ensigns were in no way supposed to dictate interplanetary policy. But it had worked, and it had been Saduk's idea in the first place anyway. I'd just played along and improvised by pouring the water over my head. He'd been as good as his word about getting a recording to me. The look on the Commander Prime Ultra's face suggested that his body was trying to evolve an asshole so he could crap himself. It was priceless. The powers that were back on Earth apparently thought that sort of initiative was worth encouraging, because they fast-tracked me to JG. Either that, or it was intended to punish me by letting me crash and burn publicly. I didn't crash, and I didn't burn. After weeks of sleepless study, I took the exams and passed them, becoming the Navy's newest lieutenant, junior grade. That was 10 years ago. Since then, I'd been promoted again to full lieutenant, while Saduk and I continued to be the human and bubbler face of the Earth-Faz'Reep partnership. I'd actually visited him and his family at home with my telepresence robot. The absolute most precious moment was when his youngest, he'd gotten married on the strength of the Tanarak incident, pointed at me, and then at the picture, yes, it was still there, and said, "That's her." That was when I knew they'd gotten the robot right. Just gonna say, infant bubblers are cute as hell. Their eyes don't really work the way ours do, but it's easy enough to figure out when they're looking at you. I've known Saduk long enough that I can tell what his expression means, and he's done the same with me. So I know when a kid's looking at me with the equivalent of a wide-eyed expression. They also love being hugged. I know that there's never going to be large-scale tourism between human and bubbler cultures. The physical barriers are just too overwhelming. Telepresence is a good stopgap, and the multiple human bubbler research labs use those robots en masse. But I can't see the instant production of tourism robots just for someone who wants to visit once. Maybe generic one-size-fits-all models? My point is, the only bubblers that the vast majority of humanity are ever going to see are the ones I've been visiting with my telepresence robot. Having Saduk pilot his own robot on Earth is always fun. It still turns heads, 10 years later. But what I'm saying is that the number of humans who have interacted with bubblers is vanishingly small, just like the number of bubblers who've had dealings with humans. So it's still more or less up to me and Saduk to maintain the public perception of bubblers as our chill outer space buddies. Well, that and the plushies, which brings me back around to the suit I was wearing. It was set up to allow me to walk around on the surface of Faz'Reep without either freezing solid or allowing any of my comparatively furnace-like body heat to escape. I didn't want to melt the sidewalk after all. They were apparently working on a similar suit for bubblers, to allow Saduk to visit Earth. If that one worked out, we were talking about adapting the technology to pay a crude visit to Mercury someday. That was the fun aspect about hybridizing human and bubbler tech. It opened the doors to all kinds of amazing options. Prior to landing, I was in orbit around Faz'Reep, currently on the night side. Their primary being a distant red dwarf. The night side wasn't all that different from the day side, but it let me cool the exterior of the suit down to a nice balmy 8 or 9K. That way, when I stepped out of the bubble one at the other end, I wouldn't be glowing white hot in their eyes. The one was also a hybrid creation. designed for human use, and the ability to not explode or melt in a human temperature environment. It would use a bubbler drive to bring me down to the surface without generating excess temperatures. Excess, in this case, meaning anything over about 50 Kelvin. Like me, it was orbiting Faz'Reep so as to shed all excess heat. Unlike my suit, its external hatches were wide open, ensuring that temperatures were balanced inside and out. The sensor gauge in my helmet pinged, and I checked the numbers. The exterior of my suit sat at a steady 9 Kelvin, low enough that I wouldn't instantly murder any bubblers I came face to face with. Which was a good thing. I was quite fond of the little guys, especially Saduk. I reached down to the tether at my waist, like the skin of the one and my suit as well. It was made of thermal superconducting material. Bubbler tech, of course. I reeled in the slack, then gave it a gentle tug. As lightweight as the Bubble One was, it still far outmassed me. The tug pulled me toward it rather than vice versa, and I drifted into the airlock as gently as a feather back on Earth. Taking hold of a hand grip, I disconnected the tether and hit the auto reel button. Once it was inside the airlock, I slapped the control to close all exterior hatches. Bubble One to Amundsen, temperatures are all in the green. I'm ready to head down, over. Amundsen to Bubble One, we copy. Commodore Lorimar was a decade and change older and crustier than when I'd been a green-as-grass ensign under her on Jovial Diver. But she'd been one of the driving forces behind keeping me in the loop with human-bubbler relations. Take care. We'll be monitoring your feed, over. Copy that, Amundsen. Bubble One to Faz'Reep Orbital Command, requesting landing clearance, over. We'd already received this permission weeks before, but it was never a bad idea to reiterate the formalities. The only hesitation was due to light speed lag. Faz'Reep Orbital Command to Bubble One. You are cleared to land. Coordinates should already be in your navcomp. You will be met once you're on the surface. Enjoy your visit, Lieutenant Hernandez. Well, that last little bit was nice. I guess I'm as much a household face and name on Faz'Reep as Saduk was on Earth. I wondered if their kids carried around plushies in my image like ours did with Saduk ones. Being famous was kind of fun, I decided, so long as the fame came in small doses. I copy, Command. Bubble One out. I called up the coordinates and kicked over the drives. Bubbler drives work on somewhat different principles than ours had when we first met them. Shoving high-temperature gases out the back end to go somewhere would never have worked for such a thermally sensitive species. They still pushed particles to make use of Newton's third law, but they used different particles and did it a lot more quietly. Between bubbler ingenuity and human brute force engineering, we'd worked out a version that would function for us without requiring a constant bath in liquid nitrogen. That was what the UNSN Amundsen had used to get me and Bubble One to Faz'Reep in the first place, and the basis of the space drives that the rest of the Navy used these days. What I was using in Bubble One wasn't anywhere near as powerful, but it only needed to get me to the surface and back again. This was literally going to be the first human-crewed landing on the surface of the Bubbler's home world. It was kind of a big deal, and I was determined not to screw things up. The light intensity on Faz'Reep wasn't exactly great, being so far away from a frankly unimpressive sun. But we'd already known that, so my suit visor had a HUD overlay of enhanced light imagery of what I would normally be seeing. I switched over to this now, killing the human normal lighting so that I'd be ready for the real thing when I got planetside. From there, it was just a matter of monitoring the auto-landing system, ensuring that the descent wasn't too fast or too slow, and that there were no sensor ghosts to screw with the dumb AI running the show. Absolutely nothing untoward happened on the way down, which was just the way I liked it. While it's cool to be commended for quick thinking under unexpected conditions, it's also nice to be known as someone who can be depended on as a reliable subordinate. Someone's got to be reporting for duty during the periods between exciting bursts of action, after all. I'd studied the maps we had of Faz'Reep, but my knowledge of their geography wasn't anywhere close to perfect. By the time the Bubble One was halfway down, I was pretty sure I didn't know where I was heading, except that it wasn't to any of their big cities, which was probably a good idea. Despite the intensive testing the cold suit had gone through back on Earth and in space, the last thing we wanted was for some kind of catastrophic failure to release a thermal burst that would potentially crater a large chunk of occupied urban landscape. The fewer innocent bystanders around during our first live test of the cold suit on the surface of Faz'Reep, the better, just in case. As the Bubble One coasted in for a textbook landing in the middle of a large paved area, I checked the scanners for any local habitation. There was none. The only things of note apart from the local geography, mountainous, and outside temperature, about 6 Kelvin, were a bubbler air car, parked at the other end of the landing pad, and 2 locals. One was Saduk. I'd know him anywhere. The other was a slightly larger, heftier bubbler with an indefinable air of being older, wearing a sash and equipment belt that looked positively military. Saduk, on the other hand, was wearing the bubbler equivalent of t-shirt and jeans. I waited until the one settled down on its struts, then unstrapped and cracked the outer hatch. It was only a short jump to the ground. I suspected water ice, but basically anything past helium and some hydrogen compounds is a rock to bubblers, and I trotted over to them. "Saduk, hey," I said with a grin. "Nice to meet you face to face at last." And it was. Telepresence robots were well and good, but they didn't feel the same as being there. "Same to you, Serena," he replied with a grin on his mouth analog. "We've come a long way to get to this point, haven't we?" "Sure have." I held up my hand and he slapped it with a tentacle. "So, who's your friend?" "Ah, yes. Lieutenant Serena Hernandez of the Earth United Nations Space Navy. Meet Captain—" He paused for a second. I could actually see the flickers of light going off under his skin as he thought about what to say next. "Your vocal apparatus is inadequate for pronouncing his name, so call him Smith. Captain Smith, of what I suppose you'd call an intelligence agency. He's here for your security." "My security?" I was taken more than a little aback. "Do you think someone actually wants to hurt me?" "Not one of ours, Lieutenant Hernandez," Smith interjected. I definitely got an old-school military vibe from him. "You are actually more popular on Faz'Reep than some of our national leaders. But we have intercepted rumors that the Tanarak are ramping up again, and there are unconfirmed reports that a stealth ship has been detected within the Faz'Reep system." "Shit," I blurted out. Sorry." Flicking my eyes over the HUD, I activated the radio. "Hernandez to Amundsen, did you get that over?" "That's an affirmative, Lieutenant," replied the radio op on Amundsen. "The Commodore is in the loop. This report only came up while you were in descent phase. If you wish to abort the mission, we can be overhead in 5 minutes. Over." I took a deep breath. "What sort of threat does a Tanarak stealth ship pose to the Amundsen? Over." "Minimal, Lieutenant. Our sensors are covering local space, and they've never been able to hide their drive signatures from us, stealth or no stealth. Even if one snuck up on us, they don't have a weapon that can scratch us, and boarding just isn't going to happen. Abort or no, over." Well, that made for a certain amount of sense. We were only just now engineering a suit that would allow a bubbler to walk on Earth, and that was with full scientific collaboration between humans and bubblers. The Tanarak had access to none of the hybrid tech that we'd developed over the last 10 years, so they were shit out of luck. Their idea of an EVA suit would likely melt in an Earth-normal environment, and if there were, by some weird chance, Tanarak on the ground in our vicinity, well, their heat guns might raise my exterior temperature to a stunning 200 Kelvin. Oh, the horror. If that happened, I'd get Saduk and Captain Smith under cover and go deal with the problem myself. I hadn't brought a gun, but I happened to be really good at chucking rocks.